And we come now to the urgent question. Neil Gray.
Mr. Speaker, to ask the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions to make a statement on the universal credit fraud that has been uncovered by the BBC.
Minister Justin Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Universal credit is now in all job centres, with around 2 million people claiming this benefit. In accordance with our approach to test and learn whilst rolling out universal credit, we have made several changes to the advance claimants that may receive while they wait for their first payment. If they need it, people can now claim an advance from day one of their claim. They can apply in person, by phone or online, a facility we introduced in July 2018. On Monday, the BBC published an article which described cases where fraudulent applications had been made to acquire advance payments. The figures quoted are unverified. Madam Deputy Speaker, those who defraud the benefits system take taxpayers' money from the poorest people in society. We have a dedicated team of investigators working on this issue, and we are working with the Crown Prosecution Service to ensure that, where appropriate, perpetrators will be prosecuted, and we have in fact already secured our first successful prosecution. We frequently raise awareness amongst frontline staff to be vigilant to fraud risks and raise concerns where appropriate. I'd like to remind honourable members and their constituents that DWP staff will never approach a claimant on social media or in the street to discuss their benefit claim. Claimants should never give out personal or financial information to a third party unless they are certain work for DWP and have followed a password or security protocol. Anyone with concerns about their benefit claim should contact their job centre directly.
Neil Gray.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to yourself and to Mr. Speaker for granting this urgent question, also to the BBC for their investigative journalism that has uncovered this scandalous situation. The cases we have seen in the news are truly alarming, truly heartbreaking. According to the BBC, and the Minister says that there are unverified figures, that these figures come from a member of his job centre team who released it to the BBC. One job centre reported a third of all claims are the result of these types of scams from criminals operating on behalf of claimants, while at another, £100,000 a month is being lost to these criminals and not going to the claimants who actually need it. People are already desperately needing help. They have been pushed into serious debt because of these actions of these appalling scammers, and it's clear from the leaked communications that staff and perhaps ministers in the DWP were aware these scams were happening. It's also worth pointing out that from the cases we have heard, claimants have been doubly hit by their money being stolen by scammers and then having to pay it back because the DWP know that it's an advance payment, which, as we all know, is a loan. The SNP has consistently condemned this system of advance payments and feel it's counterintuitive. That advance payment needs to stop being a loan. Madam Deputy Speaker, what the BBC has uncovered is that what we have been talking about for years, people being left in desperate straits because of cuts to universal credit, which has seen increased food bank use, and now, in this case, have been driven unwittingly to criminals to help them get the money they need to survive. These cases highlight the failure of universal credit to protect those who most desperately need the support that it is supposed to offer. Can't the Minister see that until universal credit is properly fixed, this type of desperation will continue? And the DWP has said it's already secured its first conviction. They've already known about this situation because the BBC, indeed the Minister, it was quoted in the BBC article from the 20th of May, which was about another heartbreaking individual case. So why did they not identify this loophole and attempt to correct it sooner? Why was this statement not made to the House so that we could have helped advise our constituents? What is the scale of the fraud? When were ministers informed? Has this activity gone unnoticed or unchecked because of the 21% cut in staff numbers reported by The Independent? Of course, the Scottish Social Security Agency has a clear commitment that when an error or fraud occurs that is not the fault of a claimant, then they will not be out of pocket, they will not be penalised. Will the Minister follow that lead for these people that have been affected? The Government's initial response and the Minister's response today has put the onus on the claimants. That is just simply wrong. They cannot wash their hands of this responsibility. So what will the Minister now do to ensure that those affected are not left out of pocket, those who have ripped them off are brought to justice, and practices are put in place to ensure this cannot happen again?
I thank the honourable member, who I know has taken a very proactive approach to this very important issue. And I share his comments about it being alarming. The criminal activity actions of what, frankly, are parasites targeting some of the most vulnerable people in society. And I can give this House assurance that the Department will be doing everything within its power to protect the vulnerable people in society. And I am assured that all honourable members and all sides of the House would support that. Madam Deputy Speaker, there have been 4.4 million universal credit claims. And as it stands, 42,000 staff referrals for fraud have been brought forward, which is less than 1% of all universal credit claims. That said, each and every one of those has the potential to be a very serious case, and we take it seriously. They are all fully investigated, and where appropriate, we will take criminal action, and we are in ongoing talks with the CPS on a number of cases, and as I have said, we have already had a successful prosecution. We will look at each of the cases that are raised, and where it is clear the claimant is an innocent victim who has been targeted, then there would be an expectation that they wouldn't pay that back. I do, though, refute the broader point about universal credit. We are going to be spending £2 billion more than the legacy system, and actually I very much welcome the introduction of the Help to Claim to scheme to provide that independent level of additional support across the Job Centre network provided by Citizens Advice, which is again an additional tier of support. And Madam Deputy Speaker, we are actively making improvements in the system. We are using more real-time information. We are working with data suppliers. We're doing more data matching. We're using the DWP landlord portal to verify on housing costs. And we are developing risking models to help assess confidence on information that is provided. But it is a balance, because rightly in debates that we've had in recent years, honourable members, honourable friends have pushed to make advance payments available as quickly as possible. So it is the balance of being able to support people who need funding, and under current rules, a vulnerable claimant in need of financial assistance can access that within their first day of their claim, with the balance of making sure that we can have 100% confidence that the money is going to the right person. But we are not complacent. We are taking this very seriously. We have a team of 120 staff dedicated on advance payments. And as I said, every case that is referred to us is taken very seriously, and we will use the full force of the law where appropriate.
Sarah Newton. Madam Deputy Speaker, there are people offering help to people applying for benefits in exchange for a cut of what they subsequently receive, sometimes a very big cut of what they receive. Will my honourable friend consider outlawing this activity and a public awareness campaign to warn people against this harmful exploitation and signpost people to free, qualified benefits advisors such as Citizens Advice?
I thank my honourable friend, who I know has worked tirelessly in this area, and this is yet another example of really helpful, constructive, proactive suggestion, and I know the Secretary of State is very keen to see this brought forward, so that is a big yes from us. And in terms of raising awareness, we are increasing training and guidance for frontline staff, and working in partnership with Action Fraud, we will be doing further national, regional press releases, social media and stakeholder engagement to both raise awareness of the potential risks of fraud and also how to report it as quickly as possible.
Margaret Greenwood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Government claimed that universal credit would reduce social security fraud and error by £1.3 billion. Now we know it's clearly failing to do that, just as it's failing to protect people from poverty. The Government's own figures show that the rate of fraud in universal credit is far higher than the rate of fraud in the benefits it's replacing. According to the BBC, fraudulent applications for advances are leaving claimants scammed and at risk of destitution, costing millions of pounds of public money. Members on these benches have repeatedly highlighted the hardship that the 5-week wait for an initial payment causes, pushing many people into debt, rent arrears or forcing them to turn to food banks to survive. The Government's stock answer is that people can apply for advances. Indeed, on the 28th of March, the Secretary of State said that she felt that the system of advances was working well. So I wonder, what does she think of it now? When the NAO highlighted delays in paying people last year, her predecessor claimed that they were largely due to the need to verify identity. She said in June 2018 that verification is a necessary part of any benefit system, and we need to ensure that we pay the right people the right amount of money. So how is it then that advances have been made to claimants with names such as Lisa Simpson, Bart Simpson and Homer Simpson? Will the Minister tell the House, then, how much does the Government estimate this fraudulent activity is costing the taxpayer? How does that cost compare with the cost of abolishing the 5-week wait? What action is the Government now taking to make sure it verifies the identity of people who request an advance correctly? And what action is the Government taking to support claimants in financial hardship who have clearly been the victim of a scam? It is clear from this report that advances are not the advance to the 5-week wait. They are loans that have to be paid off by claimants, in this case to victims of scams. The Government must finally listen to the evidence and stop the rollout of universal credit.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm afraid there was a bit of a muddle in the mixing of the difference between the verification process with advance payments and the main claims for universal credit. But as a government, we take the issue of fraud, error and overpayments seriously, and we anticipate by the time we have the full rollout of universal credit that over £1 billion will be reduced. Be patient. I'm answering the questions. I can only do one point at a time. And what we saw under legacy benefits, Madam Deputy Speaker, that there was a complex system where claimants dealt with local authorities, HMRC and DWP. And the majority of welfare issues that led to fraud, error, overpayments were related to failing to provide changes in circumstances. So with the legacy benefits, Madam Deputy Speaker, there was an increased likelihood that people would fail to report changes of circumstances. Whereas under universal credit, with a single point of contact on a digital interface, it makes it easier for claimants to report changes once, and it's easier for us to proactively identify when there are changes. So we, as a government, are still on target to see, with a full rollout of universal credit, a reduction of £1 billion. And we talk about the principle of advance payments, but remember, under legacy benefits, at the end of the claim, the payment claimed too soon. So we saw that claimants who would be going into work, but in many cases, Madam Deputy Speaker, having spent a long time going out of work, being anxious, and often in work you are paid in arrears, and that you wouldn't then have access to funding, and that caused people desperate to work, to do the right thing, to not be able to financially do that. So we moved with universal credit to bringing that the money was brought so you had the wait at the beginning, but we then had the advance payments to bridge that. And that is something that is vital to make sure claimants can then transition into work. And as I said, Madam Deputy Speaker, in my earlier response, it is the need to balance making advances quickly available to claimants and ensuring that payments are paid based on correct circumstances. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Shadow Secretary of State raised the point about names with children. So when verifying on advance payments, we will verify identity, bank accounts, national insurance, and where they are a declared non-UK national, the nationality. But to make sure that we can provide support to often the most vulnerable people in society, there is the manual checking of housing and children. And that is the bit that then can take time beyond when we've issued the advance payment, though it would be checked before the actual main claim. But as I have said, by using greater access of real-time information and data matching, we will be able to speed up that process to improve the confidence that all claimants for advance payments are valid.
Maria Caulfield.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. While it's vitally important that we crack down on fraud, will the Minister give reassurances that he will protect the vital advance system, which provides a vital financial lifeline for many, many of my constituents?
My honourable friend, she's absolutely spot on. It is absolutely vital that we strike that balance between having absolute confidence the money is being correctly paid out to making sure that we do not leave vulnerable claimants without access to money. And rightly, this government has listened to the constructive work with stakeholders to make sure on the first day of a claim, people who need financial support can get it. That is the right thing to do.
Frank Field.
The Department has a risk register to safeguard taxpayers' money. Does this fraud is this fraud listed on that register?
I thank the honourable member for that, but I will have to write back to give a specific answer on that. But what we are doing, we are aware that any case that is referred to is treated seriously. We have the dedicated team.
Order! Don't shout at the Minister. who's supposed to ask questions and get answers. Shouting at the Minister isn't part of it, and certainly not while I'm speaking. Minister.
Deputy Speaker, we do treat every case seriously, and we encourage claimants who feel they may be a victim of fraud to report it immediately, either directly to the Job Centre staff or to Action Fraud, who we were working very closely with, and I absolutely will write with a full response.
Vicky Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's obviously really important that people who need benefits should not have to wait long periods with no money in their pocket. Can my honourable friend confirm that any new measures to prevent fraud will not prevent our constituents from getting the advance payments that they desperately need?
And makes a really important point. We have to not forget the need to balance making advances quickly available to claimants and ensuring that payments are paid based on current circumstances. We must not lose sight of that.
Melanie On.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think the general public will be incredulous at the level of incompetence around the universal credit system. How can it be possible that a brand new system is open to grotesque fraud, as has been revealed this week at these levels? Is the Minister seriously expecting us to accept that the Bank of Springfield is somehow an acceptable system that Universal Credit recognises and will allow these payments to be made into?
I understand the honourable member's passion on this subject, and rightly we should be doing everything we can to protect vulnerable claimants. But I would remind, Madam Deputy Speaker, that there have been 4.4 million universal credit claims, that as it stands today there have been 42,000 referrals, each very, very important. And in context, since January, every month we have had over 110,000 requests for advance payments. And we will continue to tighten up the procedures using real-time information, data matching, the digital platforms, so that we can be as robust as we can. But we must not lose the sight of being able to make sure that vulnerable claimants have access to their funding as quickly as possible. Nobody in this House would want people to not be able to access vital financial support.
Ruth George.
Thank you very much. I've been raising this matter with the Minister for some time, and I very much welcome the fact that he says that claimants who have made a claim in error or not to their knowledge will not have to repay the advance. Will he also confirm that those claimants will be allowed to return to their legacy benefits, seeing as they haven't made a valid claim that they're aware of for universal credit, and that he will actually deal with these cases a lot quicker than the 8 weeks that my very vulnerable constituent has been waiting since I first raised this with him?
Thank you. Madam Deputy Speaker, may I pay tribute to the honourable member who raised this case for the Minister of Employment, who is responsible for this area, that helped focus our minds on what more could be done. Every individual will be treated individually, and we will look at the unique circumstances, and where it is clear they have been a victim of fraud through no fault of their own, then yes, we wouldn't expect them to be paid back, and yes, we would look at considering putting them back onto the legacy benefits if they were better off under those.
Sammy Wilson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, there is huge potential for fraud in Northern Ireland, especially around border areas, and in fact traditionally there has been a lot of social security fraud in those areas. Given the fact that the Northern Ireland Assembly is not meeting at present, and therefore the opportunities for scrutiny are very limited, what contact has the Minister had with the Department of Communities and the Social Security Agency in Northern Ireland, first of all to identify if fraud has been taking place, secondly to share the methods which are being used, and then also indicate the steps which the Department are taking so it can be used in Northern Ireland?
Speaker, on the specifics of the meetings in that case, I will have to write to provide a full answer. However, what we are seeing with the cases that are reporting is that they are clustered around particular areas. So there is a real focus in those areas to raise awareness and target often very sophisticated criminal activity. And what we are finding is, as we are bringing forward those prosecutions, that is making a significant difference in terms of a proactive deterrent, and rightly so.
Stephen Timms.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Ministers have made one monumental misjudgment after another with universal credit. the 5-week delay is forcing people into debt, into dependence on food banks, and now we learn it's opened up a bonanza for crooks and fraudsters. Will the Minister now urgently review this catastrophic 5-week delay policy?
As is very clear, any claimant from day one can access financial support where it is needed. And we will continue to do all we can to make sure that everybody benefits from the personal and tailored approach that Universal Credit works, which is an integral part to how we are helping to deliver record employment across all regions of this country.
Debbie Abrams.
I'm grateful to the Minister saying that he will consider where there has been fraudulent activity and claimants have been transferred onto UC, that they will consider revoking that. But can he explain and enlighten us all here to the DW officials' testimony at the most recent Select Committee, which said exactly the opposite?
Minister.
I thank you, Honourable. This is in relation specifically to the cases of fraud around the advance payments. I understand the point the Honourable Member is raising, and as ever we will continue to consider all of our operational activities to make sure that we continue to deliver much-needed improvements.
Leila Moran.
Deputy Speaker, the bit about this that I'm finding most difficult is that the whistleblowers were job centre staff themselves. What does it say about the culture in DWP that they didn't feel they could come to the department and had to go to the BBC? So my question is actually very simple. Did the department know about any of this in any of these cases before the BBC revealed this? And if it did, what did they do about it?
Yes, of course we did, which is why we've created the team of 120 dedicated members of staff specifically looking at the areas of advance payment, why we've been improving training and awareness, both for claimants and for our frontline staff, why we are working with Action Fraud on our communication strategy, and why, rightly, we are using the full force of the law to take out prosecutions against these parasites who are targeting some of the most vulnerable people in society.
Nick Thomas-Symonds.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The advance payment fraud was being reported in the media as long ago as last November. So whatever has been happening over the last 8 months, as the Minister has set out, simply hasn't been good enough. What would it take for the Minister simply to conclude that rather than have this advance payment system, to take away the 5-week wait altogether?
But the Honourable Member then would have the problem of the legacy benefits, that at the end of the claim as somebody moves into work would then not have the run-on of financial support, which then left the gap, recognising that the majority of people who go into work are paid in arrears. And we saw, with legacy benefits, people who were desperate to do the right thing, to unlock their own talent, were left with a financial gap at a point where they couldn't get financial support. It is not a good thing to try and advocate going back to the legacy system that trapped people in generations of unemployment.
Drew Hendry.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In responding to my honourable friend's urgent question on this shocking and disgraceful criminal activity, the Minister said he would do everything he can to, and I quote, protect vulnerable people in society. If that's the case, he will be aware that the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Terminal Illness published its report last week into his government's 6-month rule, which is causing harm and heartbreak for the dying and their families. Has he read the report's damning evidence? And if so, how can he justify his government continuing with this policy?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I will actually pay tribute to the work of the APPG, and in particular the Honourable Member for Bridgend, who has campaigned tirelessly working with organisations like MNDA, Marie Curie, Parkinson's and a number of other organisations. And as the Minister for Disabled People, I've had a number of meetings on this area, particularly around the process as somebody then claims through the special rules. We are aware, and the Secretary of State is personally passionate that we do everything we can, and this is an area that we will be doing significant improvements in the very near future.
Lisa Nandy.
The Minister's defence of this system increasingly sounds absurd. The reason so many advance payments are necessary is because of the 5-week wait that was introduced by his government that has left people in Wigan completely destitute. It is humiliating to have to beg for money at a time when you most need help in one of the wealthiest countries in the world. Why doesn't he just give up on this defence and do the right thing and get rid of this degrading 5-week wait.
Deputy Speaker, the honourable member simply doesn't understand what has happened. Under the legacy benefits, at the end of their claim as they moved into employment, they would lose the financial support whilst they wait for what was more often than not the case, that you are paid in arrears into work, leaving people without financial support. Under universal credit, whilst there is the 5-week wait for your full payments, you can access advance payments. Those moving from legacy benefits can also benefit from the 2 weeks run-on, no strings attached, additional money from housing benefit, and as of the announcements in the budget, it will also be extended to an additional 2 weeks of JSA, IS and ESA funding, which again will be no strings attached, additional funding worth potentially combined 4 weeks of additional funding.
Whitfield.
Grateful, Madam Deputy Speaker. The people who've suffered in this, the claimants themselves, had no part in the design of the system. They also feel increasingly disempowered about the whole system. But the system fraud that's being applied is one that was originally targeted against the banks. The banks across this House have been criticised for their slowness in protecting individual customers, but are now moving to a stage where they reimburse immediately and then look to the fraud. Why can't the DWP do the same for each and every claimant to take the stress of debt away from them?
I know the honourable member is being constructive with his two suggestions. Firstly, I recognise the point about people when they engage with the formal process, which is one of the reasons I was so passionately supportive of the rollout of the Help to Claim scheme, putting an independent level of support, particularly for vulnerable claimants, across the Job Centre network, delivered by Citizens Advice. I think that will make a significant difference. On the broader point about learning lessons within the banking sector, which at times I'm afraid the banking sector did have to be dragged and cajoled to do the right thing, we are continuing to look what more can be done, and if there are vital lessons that can be taken from there, those are things we should give serious consideration to.
Susan Allen-Jones.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. This whole situation is all immensely concerning. And I wonder, can the Minister tell us what's the average amount that a victim of these scams has lost? And can he tell us what the maximum amount is so far?
I can't at this stage, but this is stuff that we are looking at as we then work through those cases that have been referred. But regardless of the amount, to each and every victim, it is something that is incredibly serious, which is why I reiterate our commitment. We will do everything within our power to use the full force of the law to target those criminal gangs who are targeting some of the most vulnerable people in society.
Janet David.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, I recently spoke to somebody who works for the Job Centre Plus, who said to me they felt that universal credit was not designed to support people. And the 5-week delay is an example of this. Yeah. And instead she said that people were turning to prostitution and crime to top up their money. In light of this recent fraud, it is time that the government abolish this 5-week wait.
Yeah. Well, when we talk to work coaches up and down the country, they feel for the first time in generations they are empowered to deliver a personalised and tailored level of support, treating everybody as an individual, and it is an integral part of how we are both delivering record employment and making sure that we do everything we can to reduce the amount of unclaimed benefits. Under legacy benefits, £2.4 billion a year were being left unclaimed, which for 700,000 of the most vulnerable consumers. Now, some of the honourable members are laughing, but this £2.4 billion are for some of the most vulnerable people in society at £280 per month on average. Rightly, by delivering through universal credit, we can make sure we get support to people who need it.
Yeah. Neil Coyle.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This latest problem exposes the need for greater safeguards for anyone moving on to universal credit, be it through natural or managed migration. The Secretary of State told the Work and Pension Select Committee we would have a vote on those safeguards this month. When will that vote take place?
We are still considering how we can do this in the correct way. We are still on track to be able to do the planned managed migration going forward from the summer, so we are aware it needs to come back to the House, and we will be reporting back to the House shortly.
Thank you.